From fitness routines to mental resilience, navigating personal goals to tackling burnout, we all need a little help with the tricky work of being human. Well, that is where the Life Kit podcast from NPR comes in. If you're looking to move with more intention or just need some thoughtful guidance on living better, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. This is much more than just a show that gives you practical advice. It gives you the support and the thinking you need to navigate some of life's trickiest decisions. For instance, we're headed into the fall. Those of us with kids or those of us in school are going back to school. This can be a pretty tricky time. Well, Life Kit has a number of episodes on how to support your kids, from setting up routines to dealing with smartphones to just trying to emotionally connect with them as they go through the tricky stuff that is being a kid and a teenager. And look, I listened to all these episodes. None of them provide a one-stop miracle cure to all of life's problems. That's not how life works. But when I listen to Life Kit, I feel more informed, more assured in my decisions, a little closer to having some of the tricky things figured out. As a parent, that's basically all I could ask for. That's not to say there aren't some episodes that are really helpful at a practical level. For instance, there's a great recent episode with tips for planning a vacation, and that one was quite useful. I think I saved myself a decent chunk of change after listening to it. So if you need help tackling common issues like relationships, finance, parenting, your career, and something that gives you a game plan that you can implement right away, listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR. Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan, and happy Sunday, everyone. On Sundays, we like to bring you new conversations and stuff from the archives that provide a little Sunday context, as we like to call it. And here's what we've got in store for you today. A couple things about the growing pressure on free speech in this country, with people getting fired and suspended, lists being made on social media and elsewhere, all this being egged on by the government. It is scary stuff. Now, next week, next Tuesday and Thursday, in our usual slots, we're going to run a two-parter going right at this. Our thoughts about the way in which people are being hounded in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and a conversation about a couple other eras in American history, the early 50s and the early 2000s, that showed very similar patterns. Think about blacklists and whisper networks in the anti-communism days, or Bill Maher getting fired. Freedom Fries, you remember Freedom Fries or the show 24? So we're going to talk about all that, and that is coming on Tuesday, just as a regular podcast for all to listen to. But if you would like early access to it and you'd like to watch it, we just posted the full video of our recording to our newsletter for subscribers only. So if you're looking for a little nudge to subscribe to our newsletter, maybe this is it. You'll get to watch the full conversation right now. And of course, you will be supporting our work, which really matters to us. Thank you to everyone who has already become a subscriber of our newsletter. If you want to do that, you can go to thisdaypod.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter right now. Meanwhile, it is Sunday, and I do have something for you to listen to. This is an excerpt from an episode we did not that long ago. We recorded it last spring about the history of the relationship between governments and universities. We largely, in that episode, focused on the funding ties between the two, and this was recorded as Doge was running amok and cutting tons of grants. But in there, we also did discuss how the rise of the big universities in the 1950s, just as the Cold War was settling in, there was a big political component to that as well. There's lots of pressure being applied to universities tied to this enormous amount of government funding. And that, of course, is a component of what we're seeing play out right now as well, with professors and academics being fired, showing up on lists, and a general chilling effect around lots of public discourse. So it is worth revisiting that section of the conversation. It's about 15 minutes long or so. And if you didn't catch the full episode that we did back in April about the history of governments and universities, you can go and listen to that. It's about an hour long. Just search for Government versus Universities in the This Day feed, and you'll find it. Anyway, happy Sunday. We will be back on Tuesday with our two-parter on chilled speech, or watch it in full right now in the newsletter, thisdaypod.com. See you soon.
The 1940s is a huge moment, especially because if you think of the GI Bill, I mean, that bill was instrumental in bringing more men and women into colleges and universities in ways that they had never had that kind of attendance. I mean, colleges are doubling their student enrollment. They're having to build all kinds of new buildings because of the wave of, or the influx of students coming to college for the first time because now they can afford to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right. You have the GI Bill bringing all of these new students onto campus, and we'll talk in a minute about some of the knock-on effects of that. But I think it's worth staying with what's happening to universities in the early Cold War. Yes, they are getting tons of funding. Kelly mentioned napalm at Harvard, the Manhattan Project at the
Just to be
start
clear,
at
because we did an
Columbia.
episode about this, they
Yeah.
tested napalm
Yeah.
on the Harvard football field. It was one of my
Yes.
favorite episodes,
Yes.
but that was the first time they tested napalm was on the football field. There's an incredible photo, I think it's 45, of basically a bomb exploding on the field on like a Saturday morning.
Well, and the Manhattan Project is called the Manhattan Project because they started the exploration of making atomic weapons at Columbia's campus.
Yeah.
And then they were like, should we do this in the middle of Manhattan? Or should we go find a desert somewhere to do this? And so it moves out to New Mexico. But so these universities are instrumental in setting the conditions of the Cold War in terms of military and technology. But also they are sites of deep contention and investigation during this period. The Cold War comes directly to these universities in the form of the Red Scare, where suddenly people are forced to take loyalty oaths. They are dragged before Congress and asked whether they're communists. If people think they might be communists, they could be fired, lose their jobs, be blackballed from education. And part of the reason is not just that these are professors who are inculcating children with their ideas or young adults with their ideas. But because the university is part of the military-industrial complex, you have to get security clearances from the federal government to work on these things. And so people are getting fired. And as we've talked about before, they're also getting fired if they were gay. All of these different things were seen as sort of weak points in universities. And universities play ball. Like they're all in. As we think about what universities are doing today.
I want to return to the Red Scare pressures, especially. And, you know, there's some really fascinating stories in there that really echo now. But like, it feels to me like World War II and then the post World War II era. It kind of feels like everything. The relationship just sort of is across the broad spectrum. So you have the GI Bill, which I think falls into that category we were talking earlier about. We need to support individuals who are then going to help our country. But then there's also this sort of research institution explosion, mostly at the graduate level. It's not about individuals. It's about science, technology, things that will help the military effort. So it's just important to kind of point out how all the threads seem to be coming together in this moment. And I get what you're saying, Nikki, and we will talk about some of the like communist witch hunts. But there is also, I think, a little bit of a sense of there aren't that many strings attached. So there's at least a fundamental fealty towards this idea that we're going to give money to universities and they're going to do their thing. And maybe, you know, in return, we get an atomic bomb, great, but then we're not going to like get up in their business about the other stuff they're doing. And I think Vannevar Bush, you know, who wrote this sort of seminal paper in 1945, explicitly said that, you know, he explicitly said like the way for these institutions to work is to get funding and to be able to operate on their own. So I don't know.
Like separation of church and state.
Yeah,
like
what's your strings attached?
Give us the money and get out the way.
So like on the strings attached scale, where do you kind of come down in this like the 40s and 50s into this?
The strings aren't very onerous. I mean, again, like on the Cold War front, like the universities were playing ball. They weren't necessarily being forced that much. But also everyone, like the politicians, people in government, people in federal research institutions, people at universities, they all shared the same basic values, right? They had the same understanding of science and research and discovery. Universities were like the crown jewel of the U.S. institutional system. And so there was this sense that like, let them do their thing. They're doing great. We just need to get them more money so they can do more great things. I feel like that was the big idea, certainly starting by the late 50s and 60s, was get them the cash and they will do great things.
Yeah.
Well, folks, it happened. It's here. Fall is in full swing, and it is the perfect time to refresh your wardrobe with pieces that feel as good as they look. Luckily, Quince makes it easy to look polished, stay warm, and save big without compromising on quality. I am turning to Quince for all my fall staples that actually last. You've heard me talk about Quince on this show. You've heard me talk a lot about linen. Linen time, though, is over. It is now time for wool, denim, and even, dare I say, cashmere. Look, I never thought cashmere would be part of my life, but with Quince, there are actually pieces like cashmere sweaters and scarves and hoodies that are really nice and affordable. A 100% Mongolian cashmere sweater from $50. There's washable silk tops and skirts, perfectly tailored denim, all at prices that continue to blow me away. So keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday.
And this raises the cachet of all of these universities and institutions. I mean, they become premier competitive institutions to study for grad school, to get postdocs or fellowships to. I mean, this is when I really think you start to see the prestige that comes out of a lot of these universities from what they can produce from their research.
And it's hard to overstate, we have talked about it on the show, but how much money is floating around and sloshing around. And a lot of times you hear stories of people who kind of don't even realize that their funding is tied back to the military and they're just kind of doing their thing. They think they're at a university. And yes, I think it's a lot of the values are shared, and it's a lot of like, as long as you get us you advance the project that the government is interested in, then you can go do your own thing, which sometimes might include, hey, Ken Kesey, like go ahead and, try some of that acid that you guys are experimenting on. Psychedelics come out of this as well, and
the internet comes out of this.
The internet, obviously the internet comes out of this. Do your thing. And as long as every once in a while you kind of build us a new weapon or something, we're good.
Can we reach back for one more thread before
please.
We move out of this period? So the GI Bill. Right, opens up the university for mostly like white men, but in the process, it is opening up the university. And so by the time you get to the 1960s, universities writ large, higher education in the United States is not just an elite phenomenon. Like it is now seen as part of middle class advancement.
Yep.
And so you have all of these students who are coming from all of these different backgrounds and who are beginning to question the structure of all of these U.S. institutions. And universities are particularly hierarchical at a moment when youth culture is particularly anti-hierarchical. And so because of this relationship between the universities and the military and the government, the Vietnam War in particular becomes a flashpoint. There had been earlier flashpoints. The Black Civil Rights Movement had led to a lot of conflict with universities that were trying to either keep segregation in place or shut down protest. But the Vietnam War really brings together all of these threads and really puts a spotlight on the role that the universities are playing in the war. And students begin to resist not just the war and the military and the government, but they look at the universities too, and they're like, we need to blow this up.
Yeah, you're complicit. Yeah. And I don't want to go attend a university where they're conducting this kind of research. I don't want to be here when they're making napalm.
Yeah.
Or I want more of a voice in the decisions the university is making.
So how does the federal government then respond to that? I mean, do they try and use their funding as a cudgel to tamp that down?
I don't think so. I think what they do is they just bring in the cops. They shut it down.
And the spooks.
yes. But it becomes in the 60s and 70s, some campuses became police states. I mean, when you look at Kent State and you think about a student who is literally shot and killed by the National Guard, like they literally send in their pit bulls to enforce business as usual, to enforce the status quo. And that does shut down a lot of those protests.
Yeah. Kent State is May of 1970. I want to highlight in September of 1970, J. Edgar Hoover sends an open letter to U.S. college students, which gets printed in newspapers all around the country, basically advising them to reject leftist politics. And some of this language, well, it's funny. I went and reread the whole letter, and part of it is like, oh, wow, this is a letter intended to chill a bunch of people and threaten a bunch of people. But I also read it and was like, well, even Hoover, compared to some of the language that we see now, was at least kind of paying lip service to the idea that, like, the campuses should be, bastions of free speech, and people should have a bunch of ideas and be able to exchange ideas and express themselves. He at least pays a little lip service to that. But in this letter, which we'll post in the show notes and on social, he basically says, like, hey, 20-year-olds of America, quote, the extremists are a small minority of students and faculty members who have lost faith in America. They ridicule the flag, poke fun at American institutions, seek to destroy our society. They are not interested in genuine reform. They take advantage of the tension, strife, and often legitimate frustrations of students to promote campus chaos. They have no rational, intelligent plan of the future, either for the university or the nation. So, Hoover sends this letter when you see a letter from the FBI director, like, I think the message gets sent, though in there is not and we're going to withhold $400 million in funding.
Yeah.
Well, he saw the problem as most sort of concerned adults did, as the problem is these like out of control students, and probably that the universities aren't cracking down on them hard enough, but the universities themselves aren't the problem, right?
Yes.
We like the universities. We just need to get rid of the troublemakers.
Yeah.
Those
dang gum humanities.
Before we get into the 70s and the 80s and 90s and then to now, I do want to return very briefly to, we mentioned the kind of Red Scare and how universities got caught up in the Red Scare. And no surprise, but this, in the early 50s feels like something actually quite relevant and evocative to today.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the Red Scare, the second Red Scare in the 1950s, in part because of the role that universities played in it. So the University of California in 1950 required its faculty to sign a political loyalty oath. So first they had to declare that they weren't communists and they didn't believe in communism. And then the other was loyalty to California and to the United States, which basically said, like, we're loyal to the Constitution. We don't espouse radical beliefs. And you could already see some of the problems with this. Like, it's policing your beliefs, and it's also forcing you to sign an oath. And there's a real resistance from the faculty. They don't want to sign. 900 of them refuse to sign unanimously. And those who refused to sign the loyalty oath were terminated. They were just summarily fired. And ultimately, there's a court case about this. The courts get involved. They're like, you cannot force your faculty to sign a loyalty oath that says they don't hold radical beliefs, that they don't think radical thoughts. And so the courts strike it down, and a lot of the people were reinstated. But the pressure continues on these students and these faculty in the years ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, that feels so resonant to now, especially the kind of courts intervening. And then it's like, well, sure, but maybe some of the damage is already done.
Yeah.
And, this continues over the next year or two. Joseph McCarthy puts a lot of pressure on university administrators. And we see in the same way we're seeing now, we see some administrators kind of roll over and some push back. And then I couldn't figure out exactly why Sarah Lawrence College was a target here, but 18 faculty members at Sarah Lawrence are like basically dragged before McCarthy's Senate committee and end up being pressured to resign. But yeah, we see that kind of like individual vendetta targeting thing kind of playing out in the early 50s as well.
I would not be shocked at all if in the next year there's some version of a loyalty oath at some of these universities as a condition of federal funding.
Yeah, that would not surprise me at all either. This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network of independent, artist-produced podcasts. Don't forget to sign up for our America250 Watch newsletter. Every Thursday, members get exclusive access to analysis and information about the upcoming semi-quincentennial, commentary from our team, and a list of fascinating things that happened that week throughout history. Join in, find out lots more at thisdaypod.com. You can also follow This Day Pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Jacob Feldman is our researcher. Brittany Brown is our editor. My name is Jody Avirgan. See you soon.
from PA.